Hello everyone, welcome to yet another lesson on IELTS writing. My name is Krishnatrya and I welcome you all with a big heart to this wonderful lesson. Have you all had this question where you'd be like, goodness gracious me, how do people get 8.5 on the IELTS writing test? Well, allow me to tell you, it's actually quite simple. It's more simple than you think. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this lesson. So welcome to yet another lesson on Cambridge Veritas. This lesson is about how to score 8.5 in IELTS Writing Task 1, the ultimate strategy. So what is this ultimate strategy? For those of you wondering if it is about general writing or academic module, general module or academic module, then allow me to mention that it is for academic module, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get started. Before we dive into this lesson, I would like to talk about what is the agenda of this lesson. So in this lesson, we're going to be looking at, number one, 3 golden rules that we have to always keep in mind. Once you keep in mind these important rules, you're able to answer any IELTS Writing Task 1 of academic module. Number 2, we're going to be looking at what is this perfect structure. Holy moly, does a perfect structure exist? I've been an IELTS examiner for almost a decade now, and there exists a perfect structure. And that perfect structure is exactly what we're going to be talking about as well in this lesson. And finally, we're going to be looking at 2 examples, a weak example and a strong example. So are you ready with me? Stick to the end of this video, because towards the end, I'm going to be telling you how you can transform your IELTS writing, both Task 1 and Task 2, of either of the 2 modules, general or academic, in just 7 days. So without further ado, let's dive in. The first thing is, what are these 3 golden rules that everybody sort of keeps talking about? The first thing to remember is never include all information. Let me tell you once again, never include all information. This is a very important point. You may see a big question where there's a complicated graph or a chart or a diagram or a flow chart or whatever. As an IELTS aspirant sitting for the writing test, you do not have to include all of the information that is mentioned, and that is the first mistake that people make as well. You only have to include, it's very important, you only have to include the main features. Now, the main features that I write as a student, as a candidate, could be very different from the main features that you write, and that's totally fine. It's about what have you selected as your main features when it comes to writing and sitting down and eventually writing the test. So that's an important thing to remember. And the next and the last thing is, make smart comparisons. No matter what points you select, it's important to sort of juxtapose and find the perfect comparison of that particular data point with something that it matches with. For example, if you're talking about the height of men vis-a-vis another gender, then just compare the height of it. Don't start talking about, let's say, the food habits of it, because they don't match. So it's important to talk about the comparisons, but make smart comparisons. Okie dokie, shall we move ahead? So this was all about the 3 golden rules. We're now going to be talking about what is this perfect structure. Now watch out. This segment of the lesson is very important. Are you ready? Here we go. So first of all, you may have seen it on a lot of websites. If you're self-studying or if you've had a tutor before, they may have told you, paraphrase the question. Now there are tricks to paraphrase the question when you write the introduction. Well, we all know that. But in introduction, there's a proper strategy. Of course, this lesson will become very, very long if I start talking about all of those strategies. But it's important to remember that introduction always starts with a sentence which is called paraphrase sentence. Next, you look at the overview. You write an overview. We're just looking at the two most important, like striking main features. So for example, if you're looking at a chart that is talking about, let's say, height, the entire chart is based on heights. So you could make two most common or striking main features that you see immediately when you look at the chart. And of course, you have to analyze it, and it's important to understand that. And finally, you pick one comparison, one key detail, and make a comparison of it. And you repeat this process, key detail 2 with comparison. And I know you may be wondering, where is conclusion here? Where is Krish going to put conclusion in this structure? Now, if whilst writing all of this, you reach a word limit of 150, you are not required to write a conclusion here. On the other hand, now this is an important piece of information. If you have already finished all of this and you're still not able to reach 150 word limit, then just pop here a simple conclusion, one-liner or a two-liner, basically summarizing the entire write-up that you've written. So this is all about the perfect structure. It includes introduction, where you paraphrase the question. It also includes overview, key detail 1 with comparison, smart comparison, and key detail 2 with another smart comparison. So this is all about the perfect structure. But wait, we now have to start talking about putting this in practice and start looking at weak versus strong examples. So are you ready? Shall we start? Please have a look. So let's first look at the weak example. Ready? Here we go. Pause the video if you want to read it. Otherwise, I'm going to read it for you now. So here we go. The graph shows, whatever graph there is, the graph shows that there were more men than women in physics. Okay, thank you. In astronomy, there were also more men. Looks a little bit didactic, which basically means it's getting boring. You're just talking about only the proportion of men in different subjects. Biology had 240 men and 200 women. Okay, you're giving an example here with data, that's fine. But the same sort of pattern continues. Medicine had more similar number for both genders. Veterinary medicine had more women than men. Now, we do understand that there is comparison done. But once you look at it in more detail, there's sophistication of language that is missing. And it is definitely not a smart comparison. It looks like a 5th grader has written, apologies, but it looks like a 5th grader has written this piece because it's very simple in structure. It's got very minimal grammatical or no grammatical mistakes. Spellings are almost fine as well, but the word choice is very, very basic. Now, let's have a look at a strong example. Here we go. If you want, you can pause the video or allow me to read it for you. The data reveals. Can you see this one word here that I've highlighted? It's not the data shows. You're immediately starting with a sophisticated lexical resource, vocabulary, which is the data reveals. A striking gender disparity. What is the meaning of the word? I'm going to pause here. Gender disparity. Gender disparity here means inequality in the two genders, male versus females. Across scientific disciplines, you're not further breaking down what are the different disciplines like the other guy was doing. He's just making, or she's just making a generic statement for now. With male students predominantly occupying the physical sciences. In physics, male students outnumbered their female counterparts by a ratio of approximately 5:1. Now, that is a very nice way of sort of putting a mathematical combination, a ratio, which just goes to show your expertise in the language, with similar male-dominated patterns evident in astronomy and geology. However, a notably different pattern emerged in the life sciences. Biology and medicine demonstrated near gender parity, with female representation reaching approximately 85% of the male population. Interestingly, now that's a very nice connector being used here, sophisticated professional language. Veterinary medicine stood out as the only field where female students held a majority, exceeding male enrollments by roughly 20%. I loved this last segment. Exceeding, this person could have said, it is more by 20%, but there's a very nice way of putting it, which is represented in the last clause, exceeding male enrollment by roughly 20%. Now that is the difference between the first one that we looked at, which was a weak example, and this one. But what is so different about it? Let's understand. Sophisticated language choices is all that it takes. But what does it really mean? That's what we're going to be looking at now. So be with me and let's understand it. What are the features? Because this particular example that you saw here actually got an 8.5. And you may wonder, is 8.5 even a possibility? Well, hello, it is. There's no grammatical error, spellings are fine, punctuation looks perfect, word choices are, the lexical resources and the grammatical range and accuracy is sophisticated. So it got an 8.5. What are the features? Let's have a look at it. Number one feature is advanced data grouping. Remember, I told you about how it is not talking about different types of different subjects within physical sciences. That's what it is. So you have to make a generic statement in the beginning. If you want to sort of elaborate on it further, you can, but don't just start, dissecting it just in the beginning yet. Then life sciences as a category was mentioned and not the subparts of it. And it shows analytical thinking because you're not just looking at what's right there. You're able to sort of comprehend it to communicate it better. And that's what the entire writing task one is all about. Analytically, being able to understand the data and just using English and fancy words to be able to sort of communicate it to the examiner or anybody reading it. Now, there were sophisticated comparisons that were used. For example, ratio of approximately 5:1, which I'd highlighted. Then demonstrated near gender parity. Demonstrated means shows. Now, if you see, these words are very interesting. Predominantly, interestingly, demonstrated, gender disparity, etc., etc. So when I see all of these words, are they common vocabulary used by just about anybody, a B1, B2, or are they uncommon vocabulary? It is all, ladies and gentlemen, uncommon vocabulary. So this is what you have to keep in mind when you're writing the IELTS Task 1, Writing Task 1 or 2. Exceeded male enrollment by roughly 20%. So when you're making a comparison, there are different ways to make a comparison, and there's a proper training that is required for you to be able to understand what is the right language, especially when it comes to making comparisons. So this is what this person has mentioned here. Now there are professional transition. Remember I'd spoken about the transition of interestingly. So the transitions are coming very interesting, quite professionally. For example, reveals is striking. Again, the only word show can be communicated in many ways, like demonstrated. Reveals a striking means an interesting something as you sort of continue. If you look at this phrase, this is something that you can use almost anywhere. It's just that you need to sort of train yourself with those ready-made language, which we also call collocation in your daily lingo, to be able to communicate it to your examiner who's reading your passage. However, notably different pattern, and interestingly, so the transitions were very good. Data grouping was done professionally. Comparisons were done in quite an analytical manner, and there were professional transitions as well. And finally, there was precise vocabulary. For example, not using the word inequality, which is very common. You'd rather say gender disparity. And then predominantly, which means something that happens mostly, and counterparts. And finally, enrollments. Well, okay, may sound like a simple word, but then the collocation in the context in which it was used to sort of put it appropriately, that's also where you get extra marks. So how you put the sort of words together, making the right collocations, also badges you extra marks. There's something to remember though. Band 8.5 doesn't just describe. It's not only telling us what you can see, ladies and gentlemen, on the chart or the bar graph or the diagram, etc. It is analyzing it as well. It analyzes patterns and shows relationship between data points. I want you to write these two words down somewhere. If you're watching it on your phone, use a notepad and type these two words down. It's not about describing. It's about analyzing the pattern. Take a 1-minute break. Look at the chart. You look at what patterns are going on. And then later, showing relationship between the data points. What is the meaning of data points? It basically means two pieces of information. For example, in the strong example that we'd seen, it was talking about not just basic comparison of subjects, but it was talking about where was gender disparity, where were men more than women. It was not just talking about men are more in physical sciences, and then men are more by 540 numbers, let's say, off the top of my head. I may not be right there, but that's what it means. It's about being able to pick the right data points and sort of putting it together to make the right comparisons in relationship as well. So finally, avoid these 3 common mistakes. Never include all the numbers. Not required. Remember this point again. Never include all the numbers. What do you have to include once again? Come on. I told this to you before. You have to include main points, not all the numbers. Next, no overall trends. You do not have to talk about all the trends that exist, only the main trends and making comparisons. And finally, avoid basic language. Academic language is what you have to talk about. Now, some people actually also make a big deal out of it, and they say that, well, if I have to say I'm fine, I will say I'm supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Well, that's not what I mean by using fancy language. In the context of IELTS, you have to use academic language, avoiding the basic daily lingo that we make use of. So that's something to remember. And finally, we are towards the end of the lesson. Here we go. How can you transform your IELTS writing score? If you're stuck at band 6.5 or less for a long time, and if you're watching this video, you have wasted a lot of money, and you've also wasted months and months, and you're not just able to fulfill your dream of traveling abroad. And finally, if you're confused about what are the expectations of an examiner, then as an examiner myself, this is my suggestion. There is a 7-day masterclass that you can join, which is solely focusing on IELTS writing. I repeat, it is solely focusing on IELTS writing. And what happens in it? In this masterclass, I have been rambling a lot about sophisticated language. You get to understand how to use sophisticated language, what are the appropriate ways of doing that, with the help of live trainings, which happens on a different portal called My Veritas app. And with that, you also get expert feedback daily, which is very important. Because in this journey, you may be working with thousands of other students, but unless you get your personalized feedback, any training is worthless. And then we talk about proven strategies that have worked for Task 1 Academic General and Task 2 Academic General modules. And then most important, you get to practice with personalized corrections. You get a final assessment report that sort of bridges the gap between what you do not know to what you exactly have to do. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, is something that makes all the difference in the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, also helps you with your Band 8.5 template and samples as well. And that's all that we have in today's lesson. Thank you very much for being with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked this video, then please do press the like button as well. Subscribe to the channel, and if you want more updates, make sure that you go to the website and subscribe for updates, because we keep on sending a lot of PDFs and just helpful content to our students who are just looking for right guidance but do not have the right place to be. Thank you very much for being with me in this lesson, and I'll see you in some other lesson. Until then, take care and God bless.